Hey, everybody. This is the Angel Dog Podcast. This is Brian again with my weekly guest, my compadre from DOJ, DEA. Again, every week, I got to say, some of you people got to look up what the hell that is, right? I know, believe it or not, narcotics is still illegal, i.e. fentanyl, right? But anyway, look, myself and John were just talking, my guest, John Seaman, off camera before we got started here. And I want to give you my take, and I think John agrees. At our age, both of us well into our upper decades in the final quarter of life, and we have served, and we did our time, okay? And both proud of it, may I add. So we're both proud Americans. Whether that means red, blue, or in between, we're both proud Americans. John, you're not a member of any anti-social group, are you?
No.
I hope not. Neither am I. Not yet, anyway. But for the audience, I want you to understand, this is our give back. Several other podcasters come to mind. There's many out there. Mike Glover, Andy Frisella, maybe even Jocko Jocko Willink. Look them up. You guys should know who they are. And they've said, hey, where are you guys at? Where are you guys that did this and did that in special operations or whatever? Where are you at? Why are you not standing up for what is going on inside the government? Well, you know what, folks? Here we are. All right. And so Andy and Mike Glover in particular, we're here, man. We'll carry our end of the ball. There's no question about it. And, it is what it is. Everything is documented. T's are crossed and I's are dotted thanks to this man, my guest, John Seaman. And with further ado, we're going to get into it tonight. I'm the technical genius on this end. I laugh because that's not true. And we have a PowerPoint for you. Last week, we went a little over our time. We try to keep it in about an hour. John every week makes me go to the encyclopedia to pull all these freaking names I've never heard before. Well, some of them I had. Hillary Clinton, go figure, right? Most wanted woman in the world. Liked woman? Or I don't think so. But the bottom line is I pulled every one of them up. So John's educating me. I had the 10,000-foot view. Now I'm coming down. I might be about 6,000 foot. But John's the man. And tonight we're going to talk about, John, this is the AlfaBank Rouge, which is the first overt act. Am I right?
That's correct. That's correct. This is the first criminal overt act.
First criminal overt act.
In furtherance of the conspiracy agreement.
There it is. And again, we gave you those conspiratorial elements last week. We talked about fusion GPS before that and CrowdStrike. We talked about the Steele dossier. We did the unmasking. We did the effect of the media being involved, and we talked about Benghazi and Fast and Furious operations. What a sad state of affairs, man. Just a sad state of affairs. And we did an opening with an intro about the Durham investigation. So I just sit back. Man, there's a lot of names. So you got to go do your own homework. And I'm going to go up here, John, and I'm going to open up your slide presentation. I'm going to share, I'm going to minimize that for 1 second and share the screen with my guest. And here we go. John, you should have it.
I've got it. I'm looking at it. But before I get into the
go ahead.
Presentation on this, let me cover a few items. We're halfway there. This is number 5 of a series of 10, and then trying to educate the public on the greatest coup in American history, the Russian hoax conspiracy hoax. Where you covered the big lie theory on how they put together, trying to make who the object of hate. One thing I want to bring up on the big lie theory is there was a study that came out today from the University of Chicago that should concern all Americans, where 30% or 12% of the people, which is 30 million Americans, the study said that violence would be warranted to stop Trump from getting into power. Why is that important? Because that's almost less than a third of the American public willing to do violence to stop a person if he's duly elected to be president. It goes against everything in the system. I want to go back to that because when we started and explaining the big lie theory, what the media's done, what the organizers of this design plan have done, is in order to get to this point, they had to make somebody the object of the hate to bring all these people together. And what they've done to Trump by making him the object of their focus of hate is the same that Hitler did in Germany to make the Jews the focus of their hate. To be able to allow the Nazis to be able to do all the evil things they did to the German public and also to the world by making the Jews the scapegoats. Well, the same thing, the same analogy applies here with Trump, because here's what I ask you out there in the public. When you talk to your friends, ask them this when they say, well, I hate Trump, he's a crook, he should be locked up forever. Ask them this simple question. Why? Have them give me an example. What has he done wrong? Have them articulate, why do they hate him? And most of the time they will not. All they'll do is they'll get frustrated. They'll regurgitate talking points they've heard over and over again on the media over the last 7 years. And that's the point I'm making. So this goes right in hand where you've got already 12% of your country willing to take up and do violence to keep a man from elected office. And that goes against all constitutional principles, period, if you love this country. Now, we covered a lot of subjects in the first 4 gamuts. We covered the big lie, the unmaskings, the misuse of color of authority. And last week, we covered the most important segment, which was explaining to you, the public, the conspiratorial agreement. What was that agreement? They came together. The conspiracy is a real simple conspiracy. They conspired to do 2 things: to destroy Donald Trump from being elected when he was a candidate. After he got elected as president, they started manufacturing crimes to keep and to ruin his presidency. And after he left his presidency, they continued to present day to keep him from running for office again, affecting what? 3 major elections: the 2016 election, the 2020 election, and the 2024 election. So with further ado, we're going to go and get into the overt criminal acts. This is the first one of the series, and it's important because it sets the stage for the conspiracy on how they did what they did. Let me explain. The modus operandi, the fabrication of the Alpha Bank. What did they do? Okay, they contracted out with a person that was part of the cyber community, and they used his abilities, and they ended up fabricating evidence. They exploited, they had a contract with the Defense Department, and they ended up exploiting that contract and getting into the executive office of the presidency with fake data. So basically they set up a ruse, and the ruse was that Trump was in contact with Russian banks. And that was the ruse they were selling to the public way back in April. So they created this technology company. They created and falsified documents. They created white papers, files, and they purported a secret communication channel between the Trump organization and the Russian-owned Alpha Bank. Third, they used that company to predicate, okay, to try to get FISA warrants on Trump Tower, the apartment, and showing that the White House server had been penetrated. Fourth, they gave the information to who? Christopher Steele. What did he do with it? He's the one that put it into the dossier, and the dossier became then the focal point for the FBI to be able to get FISA warrants in October of 2016. President Obama knew about this, Hillary Clinton, the DNC. It was all part of their scheme to put out fabricated, manufactured disinformation. And yet the FBI, the CIA, and the powers to be did nothing to stop this. Okay, instead they advocated this false narrative for the last 7 years that Trump was an illegitimate president and had colluded with the Russians. Next. What they found is they had the Durham report was specific. One thing Durham did do is he was able to show when they met, when they schemed on how they were going to do this. They had a meeting, basically. Durham connects the dots between Sussman, Ellis to Steele, Sussman to the Clintons campaign, and Sussman to Jaffe. And Jaffe was the tech executive that Durham identified in his final report. And that Jaffe then used two federally funded university people out of Georgia Tech that were working on a government contract that they've had for the last couple years, where the Defense Department was developing counter cyber measures on how to counter cyber intrusions into the United States.
John, if I have a question on that, I was looking at that.
Yeah.
Was that a DARPA at Georgia Tech? Was that under a DARPA program, DARPA?
Yeah, I believe it was. I got it on one of the slides here when we get to it.
Okay.
Next slide. The TECHoFOG, as I told you, he wrote a great article. He's on Substack, and he laid out and he did a deep dive analysis into the Durham's reports and all the indictments and everything else. And he just regurgitates what Durham said. It's a conspiracy. It started a while ago. It continued into August of 2016. It shows that Sussman, Ronnie Jaffe, and agents of the Clinton campaign, along with Perkins Coie, they met at the office of Mark Elias on August of 12, 2016, where they discussed the Alpha Bank allegations that they were going to give to the FBI. So think about this, ladies and gentlemen. In August, remember, you had where the Russians had intercepted Hillary's plan. The British intel had told Brennan that the Russians had intercepted his plan. He then briefed Obama. Brennan then, with Comey and them, opened up, instructed the Bureau to open up 4 cases on Trump's people. And hence, what do you have next? You have the next thing, which is this meeting on the 12th, where you have some of the co-conspirators have a meeting in Perkins Coie to do what? To conceive the idea of Glenn Simpson's idea of how you take guilt by association evidence and turn it into a criminal matter where you're going to manufacture actual evidence of a crime. That's basically why the importance of the Alpha Bank information, what it really means. It's not like they just took where you go on the open net, you just take information and then you put it out there and you make allegations. Here, they actually went to the level to create the crime. Basically, the old Russian Vera thing, show me the man, I'll show you the crime. So think how nefarious this is, ladies and gentlemen. They had to actually plan with a tech person using his abilities and his networking with these Georgia Tech researchers to create cyber tools to do what? To create the illusion out there that if people are out there looking at this and doing their homework, that they'll see that Trump's tower is being pinged, meaning that it gives the illusion that that Trump's in contact with the Russians. All manufactured, all a big lie.
Hey, John, I think I accidentally may have skipped a slide for you, and I think it's kind of important, right? Did we get that? I think you skipped
Which
over.
one?
Sussman obtained mining data. Did we do that?
Yeah, that was part of the last slide. That's what he did. He's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now let's go to the FBI, just to let you know. So now we explained to you that the intercept in July, that the Russians intercepted Hillary's stuff. They tell Brennan tells Obama. The Bureau opens their investigations up on Team Trump. In that summer, before that occurs, the FBI puts in an emergency order asking the FISA court to get permission, okay, for 3 of Trump's properties Trump Tower, New Jersey, and Mar-a-Lago, along with intercepting the communications for Alpha Bank and another Russian bank. Okay, that they have a request. It goes to this Judge Broberg. He's not named in the report, but when you connect the dots in the timeline, he's the only one that was doing FISA duty that week. So he was the only judge that could have been the judge that had it.
We know any more about that judge? Is that just coincidental? We know anything more about him?
Yeah, Brosberg is allegedly, I heard from my sources that he had new Strzok and Page. I don't know if they had a relationship or not, but he didn't know who they were on the thing. And then you have also, ladies and gentlemen, you have you have texts during that time frame where between Page and Strzok discussing that they need to get to the FISA judges to educate them. Okay. Now I don't know what that means from that standpoint, but it indicates that, hey, we've got to do our homework with the FISA judges to get this over the top. Okay. And the next thing you see is in October, what do? They use the Steele dossier with the Alpha Bank stuff in it to get what? To get a search warrant, which starts off this whole nightmare of where we're at today. Now, this was all documented by Jay Sekulow in an article, and also written by this author, Klein, published in a book, An All-Out War, The Plot to Destroy Trump. And this is out of his book, his information. He said that the judge didn't meet this, found that the emergency filings didn't meet the standards of immediate danger to the security of the U.S. because there was no evidence of a natural emergency. And for that matter, no proof that Donald Trump was connected to Russian espionage. So think about that, ladies and gentlemen. You had the judge in the FISA court turn down a search warrant in this early summer of 2016 before they even get into making up the Alpha Bank data points. Okay, manufacturing the evidence. So what does that tell me as an investigator? What that tells me as an investigator, that this plan was backdated and was discussed way back when. Okay, that's what it tells me on this thing. And then you have in September the emails that go from Perk and Coey to FBI Baker that the FBI should have Alpha Bank pertaining to Trump and a server on that. And that's important information. Again, it shows pre-planning way ahead of time before they even launched the Alpha Bank stuff with Jaffe. So they had to be in discussions with Jaffe way back when, with the Georgia Tech people way back, probably in April timeframe on the thing. Because the information that Seaman gave to the FBI was dated or showing that the contacts began in April of 2016. Why is that important? Because April seems to be the key month where your conspirators honed in on Team Trump. That's where they had the FBI opened a case up on April 1st, I believe, on Page. You had the April 4th meeting at the White House between Rice, Clapper, Comey, exec. And then you had Brennan, I believe, on the 6th, opened 2 task forces with the Bureau on targeting Trump's people. So now as you can look back and see how this plan is evolving, how it comes about from this standpoint. Next slide. CIA involvement. Now, this is really important. Seaman takes the information to the CIA. Okay. Go back to the CIA slide, Brian. He takes it to the CIA, and the question is why? The CIA doesn't have any, they're prohibited from conducting any domestic operations in the United States by law. They're supposed to only collect on foreign countries and their citizens. They're not supposed to get involved in any domestic, especially U.S. Presidential candidates at that time. Yet they took the information, okay, that Seaman gave them, and they actually did a good thing for the country. They actually showed and did the research and showed that the information had no merit. It was manufactured. That's very important because they're the ones that said what Jaffe and that researchers put together with Hillary's team, the lawyers. Now you can see that that manufacturer was manufactured. And that's important because it shows it was manipulated. And for the CIA to do their homework and tell them that it had no merit, that's evidence to show that it's a criminal act as far as I can see. Next slide.
John, if I may just chime in, outstanding. Two things. The Obama administration at this point had been around for a while, right? So
Yes.
how I just cannot believe, we talked about this before, that those analysts, tech people, other than agents that support the agents' investigations, knew what was going on or where this was going, like a Ed Snowden kind of thing. They didn't realize, somebody didn't come out and become a whistleblower.
Well, I think
really.
Well, I think, Brian, at this point right now, where we're at on the Overt Act in August, I think when you look back and you go all the way back, this was done at the leadership. So the leaders knew. Obama, them, Brennan, Comey, all those folks had actually put this thing together with Hillary and the DNC. The people in charge knew exactly what they were doing. Because remember, before they did the Alpha Bank stuff, what did they do? They did the entrapment operations first, targeting, using Massoud, and then later Halper to target Papadopoulos and the other aides of Trump. So that was the first part of their plan. That didn't work. They didn't get the satisfaction what they thought they were going to get out of Papadopoulos when they targeted him. They fed him that information. He fed it to Trump's people, but Trump's people ignored it. And that's one of the findings that Mueller found out in when he first started his investigation, was that none of the Trump people bit on the information that was sent or given or whatever by Papadopoulos on what he got from Massoud. Means that's exculpatory information that the Trump people had no interest, period. And that's where Mueller's case should have ended right there, but it didn't. They went on for another 18 months. So now you can see what they do here. So in their plan to this nefarious plan to destroy Trump, they pulled out all the stops. The first part of the plan failed, okay, because Trump's people didn't bite on it, okay. Then they went to the second part. In April, what did they do? They opened a criminal case or a counterintelligence case on Page. They opened 2 task forces on the rest of these guys. Back in April, you started seeing the news articles come out, and you had the Nellie Orr dossiers with Shears coming out to the press. So you started having the inklings of the plan. Trump colluded with the Russians. So when you're a public here, you have to look back and take a seat back and say, how did this come together? Well, this is how it starts coming. The pieces are coming together. The first
John, your investigative presumptive answer then is the leadership implants started long before. So they can control, for lack of better terminology, I don't mean to be derogatory, they can control the minions doing the work. So it started the master plan way before. John, are you gonna give the audience any indicator, just real quick, about what Alpha Bank fits in the world? Do you have any 2 lines?
Well, Alpha Bank's a Russian-owned bank. That's all I know. And you got to give the Russian bank credit, because if it hadn't been for the owners of that bank suing Christopher Steele in British court on a defamation case, we probably wouldn't have gotten any of this information. Because all this information surfaced from their civil lawsuit that they had taken depositions from Christopher Steele. That's what's so great about this, is you actually get real evidence. And we're going to go through this because that's part of the slideshow. Let's go to the next one.
Let me just throw this one line out. Again, little homework here for John that I did on my own to assist John. That Alpha Bank is renowned for investment banking, asset management, insurance, and more. But the big deal is, here's a word we all should know: Ukraine. Okay, Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Cyprus. So they were world renowned, which means there could be other ne'er-do-wells in the mix. I won't get off track. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me go here. Now, this is important because let's get to the Jaffe, the man behind the data mining AlfaBank-1st. Jaffe wasn't named in the indictments. He was an unnamed person, but it came out he was the person that was behind. He was the unnamed tech exec. Okay. What he did was he formed a group of contractors connected to Georgia Tech of Technology, Georgia Tech, they call it, and finding connections on the internet data that would link Trump to Russia, and then make, according to a 216 email sending to the researchers to tie that guilt by association in there. At the time, Jaffe was also advising President Trump on security matters, and himself, he's a top cybersecurity guy, okay? And he participated, he was anticipated to be, if Hillary Clinton would have won the election, he was going to allegedly be given a major post in the Clinton administration, a top security cyber job by the Democrats, if they won. And that's in an email that the prosecutors obtained. Then in September 2016, that's when the group, this research group, and this stuff on that Jaffe had and all these cyber left-wing guys out there in the cyber world, that's when they started accusing Trump of maintaining a secret back channel through the Kremlin, through his email servers of Russia-based AlfaBank. How they do that, again, it's that information, and we're going to get in this as the next slides will show on how they set this up with the news, on the mainstream news. It's quite interesting on how they put all the little pieces to get this story out to you, the public, to make you believe that Trump was tied into AlfaBank and colluded with the Russians. In the grand jury indictment of Seaman, it states in there, and this is one of the issues I have with Durham, it says that the federal contractors who mine the private internet records to help conduct opposition research in coordination with the Clinton campaign was not driven by data, but by bias against Trump. Very important, because that shows intent. Very, very important part on a conspiracy case. Why did they do what they did? They had bias. So let's explain here what was going on. 2009, the Mariposa Working Group was formed. It was an informal group by the Defense Intelligence Service, Georgia Tech Information Security Center, and this Panda Security, and all these other researchers and law enforcement agencies. And their job was to analyze and the extermination of this Mariposa botnet back, I don't know when that occurred, but I guess there was a real bad virus that was infecting all the computer systems. And this is where Jaffe became the hero, because he's the one that was able to develop the program to stop the botnet virus. So he was awarded the FBI director for outstanding cyber investigation. The Georgia Tech researchers were vying at that time for a $17 million Pentagon contract on cybersecurity, which they landed in November, okay? And on that security, that project dubbed Roma, I can't even pronounce that, would allow researchers to ship through existing and new data sets to find bad actors on the internet, kind of like a connecting the dot type thing through the internet. The indictment of Seaman said the researchers provided early access to the internet data system in order to establish a proof of concept for work under the contract. So what's important about this is they were rewarded a DoD contract. They used that contract, okay, to basically manufacture the white papers, the data points, and what Seaman downloaded, and they put on a plugin that Seaman gave to the FBI and the CIA. That's the information that came off that contract. So basically, they're working under a federal contract using the federal money.
Which is tax, John, is that not taxpayer dime at some point somewhere?
That's taxpayer money.
Unbelievable. It's
Taxpayer.
incredible.
Think about this,
You
ladies
need to
and
have
gentlemen.
classes on this.
They used Department Defense contracting, Georgia Tech experts
Yep.
under the rouge to do what? To look for dirt on Trump on the internet, on the databases. And what did they come up with? They came up with this AlfaBank manufactured plan that Trump coordinated with AlfaBank. It's amazing. It really is. And then Jaffe, they identified the two researchers. I believe one of them was given immunity. This guy, Davis Dagnog and Magnos, it's a Greek name. I'm horrible with last names. To search broadly through for any information about Trump's potential ties to Russia. So the question I have as a criminal investigator, ladies and gentlemen, is this is the reason why you have to have, if we get a new president in there, a new AG, you need to go back and open up a conspiracy case so you can go back and get the answers from all these people of why they did what they did, how they did what they did, and put this thing together instead of just glossing over and using the theme that it was just opposition research, because this is not opposition research. This is manufacturing of a crime, period. Okay, let's look at direct testimony.
John, if I may throw in a quick fact, because it's important, and this is only to assist John, that, again, I might not pronounce this right, that Mariposa botnet from, I won't say where it's at, my day job, I remember that coming up, and that was around December of 2008. It infected millions of computers, and it got, personal information and financial data. That's why it was one of the, at that time, it was probably one of the most prominent ones ever in the world. Anyway, that's it.
Oh yeah, it was a huge deal. That's why
huge deal.
That is why Jaffe is considered one of the top cyber experts in the world.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right.
So let's get into it. Thank goodness for AlfaBank doing the defamation suit. They did a depot of steel between March 17th and 18th of 2020. We're going to cover we're going to cover Ronnie Mook's testimony at trial, and we're going to cover GPS employee, Fusion GPS employee Laura Sago, and then we're going to cover part of a congressional testimony by Victoria Noodle. Next slide. Okay, let's go. What did Steele say? This is important. He said he met two lawyers from the law firm of Perkins Coie, representing the DNC and Hillary Clinton's campaign. He identified them as Michael Sussman and Mark Elias. Okay. He said Sussman provided him a tip that the Russian bank had a secret communication channel to the Trump organization. And he said it was kind of funny because they were in a room and Ellis was behind the door on the adjoining door as Sussman passed Steele the information of that Trump had was colluding with AlfaBank. Then on September 14, 2016, Steele said the information from Sussman and Ellis resulted in him publishing his memo on the 14th, 2016, accusing the founders of AlfaBank of having illicit ties to Vladimir Putin, which he included as part of his dossier. That is so important because that dossier now, remember, that's the piece that the FBI used to get the first FISA warrant. In August 2016, he says he received a call from the Brookings Institute. Where does that ring a bell? Well, who were the Brookings Institute? The Brookings Institute were the people that they used to circulate the Steele dossier to State Department, throughout the government, to give the appearance that all this information was coming from different sources to camouflage it when it all came from one source, Steele, his dossier. He contacted Strobe Talbert. Talbert was interested in the information. He had prior served as deputy secretary for President Clinton back in the days under the State Department's Foreign Advisory Board, and also as Secretary of State. Then November 2 or 3, Steele said Talbert asked him for copies of his dossier. Talbert wanted to discuss with then Secretary of State John Kerry and others officials at the State Department. Why is that important? Because now you've got Steele pushing that information to Talbot. Talbot's going to state, he's going to meet with who? Secretary Kerry, a high-level official, to do what? Have State come in and say, we've got this information on Trump that show he's colluding with the Russians. Great way to do it. Then on November 12th, according to the lawyers for the Russians, for Alpha Bank, Steele wrote to the Brookings Institute about the dossier in an email, and he says, "Dear Scrove, I know this is not straightforward, but we need to discuss the package we delivered to you the other week, and the sooner the better." So it shows, again, the intent of how intensely they were to get this circulated to promote what? The big lie. Out to the public to do what? To deceive you, the public, okay, that Trump was colluding with the Russians.
John, before we leave this slide, I have an investigator's question to you, from me to you.
Yeah.
For the audience. So would you consider, I'm asking, would you put the Brookings Institution, based on what we've all heard from you and your background as an expert in conspiracy, would you consider the Brookings Institution part of the facilitation of the conspiracy?
Oh, yeah, they would definitely be a co-conspirator. I would take the Brookings Institute and all the people that were identified in the Brookings Institute or associated there afterwards with, like in Lawfare and some of the others that used to work for Brookings, that took part in promoting this fake document.
Beautiful.
To the public.
Okay, go ahead, John.
Okay, Steele claimed that President Obama and his national security advisor Rice and Victor Nuland, Assistant Secretary of State, knew about the dossier. He's testified that they were both, all three at one time were either employed or were associates at where? The Brookings Institute. So now, ladies and gentlemen, when you look back and you start looking and you identify from the beginning of the conspiracy and you start walking in all these players from DeVecchio, what's DeVecchio? He worked for the Brookings Institute way back 2005-10. Who else worked there? Fiona Hill. Can't forget her from that standpoint. So when you start connecting the dots of the Brookings Institute, now you can get a clear picture of who they went to, how they disseminated and used circular reporting to do what? To defraud you. Okay, testimony of Rodney Mook. This is important. He was Clinton's 2016 campaign, and he testified that Michael Sussman, Hillary Clinton, they agreed to leak, and I think people on her campaign, they agreed to leak the allegations that the Trump organization had a secret channel with Russia Alpha Bank. That's important because there you go. It shows their intent, knowing that it's a manufactured information to do what? To deceive the public. Again, they agreed. That's an important deal. Part of the conspiratorial agreement to do what? To defraud the public. Moot noted that she personally authorized her campaign to share the information and the data, the manufactured data that Trump was with a Russian bank. Mook stated he was briefed about the Alpha Bank by a general counsel on her campaign, on Hillary's campaign, and also at the time was a partner at the law firm of Perkin Cohen, and informed that the data people doing this had expertise in that sort of matter. So that goes to the intent to show that they actually were manufacturing cyber information to do what? To give the appearance that Trump had colluded with the Russians by manufacturing the crime on it. Mook said he discussed the matter with top Clinton aides Podesta, Jake Sullivan, Jennifer Palmieri, and also with Clinton herself. Mook claimed under oath he was not sure the evidence credibility at the time. He justified the leak to the media, claiming the purpose of it was to get reporters to run it down and vet it out. Well, when you think about it, It's not to vet it out. It's to get it out there to give the illusion to the public that Trump's a member and is colluding with the Russians in the story. The first evidence of Clinton showing was aware of allegations of a purported secret bank channel between the Trump organization and Russian bank before the theory emerges publicly 8 days before the election. So it shows it was part of that Alpha Bank plan that I believe goes all the way back to April of 2016.
Furtherance of the Overt Act.
That's correct. Testimony of Lauren Sago. She worked for Fusion GPS, and this is important because she's testifying about how they pitched Glenn Simpson's guilt by association big lie that Trump was associated with the Russians. So they gave the information to various newspaper reporters, and this is illustrated to the one on the emails that Durham's team found from this Franklin Fourier, who wrote at the time for Slate and other reporters, giving the illusion that a group of computer scientists had found malware emanating from a bank in Russia to one of Trump's servers registered to the Trump organization in Trump Tower. Why is that important? Because now they're using their outside folks on the left to come up and tell the public. They've been doing their independent research as cyber people out there, and they've now found a smoking gun of cyber connections between Trump and the Russians, okay? Which now you know that was all BS. It had no substance. In July 4th, let's go back a bit, July, that big month where everything came together from the agreement to finding out about Hillary's plan, the ordering of the investigation into Team Trump. Slate publishes an article titled Putin's Puppet, alleging Trump's ties to the Russians in Alpha Bank. That is important because they hadn't even launched the Alpha Bank manufacture the information according to the thing, which tells you that the information had to be manufactured way before this time frame. It had to be done way back when. So the work by these researchers. So as an investigator, if we were doing a criminal conspiracy case, what I would be doing is going back and finding out when did these two researchers and when did Jaffe and his team of cyber people, when did they start? When did they start this plan? When did they start putting it together? And how did they do it piece by piece? And what time frame did it start? And what was the sequence of events that got us to the Alpha Bank release of the information?
But John, you'd have to have a whole financial piece to that also. I mean,
that's correct. That now you
financial, yeah.
And the only way, again, for the public to unravel this nightmare is you have to actually do an investigation.
Oh,
and that's what Durham did his part in identifying it's a conspiracy, but he never went back to do a conspiracy case because his prosecutors looked through the eyes that this was just disinformation. This was dirty tactics. It wasn't a crime. It is a crime. He then in October, and this is critical when you timeline it out, she gets her wish, choosing GPS gets her wish. Fourier produces another story in Alpha Bank, publishing an article on the 31st, right before the election, that Trump's server was communicating with Russia. Okay. And that's important because this was all done through a guy named T. Leaves under the pseudonym. They've got to protect him. He's some guru out there, like you see on the internet out there. All these guys are using pseudo, and he's out there and saying all his people are pinging, and they're getting these pings back from Trump's the server in Trump Tower. All bullshit, all made up on there. So now you can get a picture show of how they created the false narrative to the public that Trump had colluded through the Russians using the Alpha Bank rouge. Next slide. Victoria Noodles is important because she testified a year prior in 2016 that Jonathan Winter, State Department employee, told her that Steele in September had reviewed a copy of the dossier and wrote a 2-page summary of the Steele dossier intel and gave it to Newland to share. So as you can see, Weiner was the time a member of the State Department, another member tied into what? The Brookings Institute. So now you can start seeing the web of how these people do their thing through their known associates. They use all their relationships to put out the disinformation, the networks, to make you believe that all this information that Steele wrote up in his dossier was all separate stuff and came from numerous separate sources, thus giving the illusion there was credibility behind it when none of it was true. Next slide.
May I just throw something in on Ms. Newland? I think she was also involved in the U.S. policy with Ukraine in the Ukraine debacle in 2014 in some shape.
She was the, I believe she was one of the main persons that got or helped get rid of the Ukrainian Prussian.
These are all big players, John. These are all.
Yeah, these are all, it all interrelates. Ukraine, all this stuff ties, all comes together. And then the most important aspect of so you know you've got evidence of a crime. You've got in July 220, the British court orders Steele that rules that he violated their privacy law and that he failed to check any of his information, and of accusing the Russians of being tied in or making payments to Vladimir Putin. Yeah, and basically chastising Steele for writing a major disinformation document in civil British court. And that's great evidence for a criminal side for our point, because it shows that all this was knowingly put together, purposely, willfully, where they had animus with Trump, and that this was a part of a well-designed plan. Just goes as evidence to show how these pieces come together and how it was part of this well-designed plan. Next slide. Okay, let's look at the documentary evidence real quick. You've got the email again from Frankfurt 4A to Fusion GPS talking about Alpha Bank. That corroborates the testimony of what Sasso said in Sussman's trial. So now you see that you've got a reporter in contact ahead of time with Fusion GPS talking about writing a story and getting that out there on their behalf. Next slide. Then you have another email in October for the second story on there from the same reporter. So it shows you the connection between GPS, the media, on how they got this story out to the media and how they got willing people in the media to write this story on Alpha Bank, okay, from the standpoint. Then we have more emails from the New York Times, same type of information, corroborating how Fusion GPS got the Main Street media to write stories. Next slide. Okay, Joffe's association with the Biden White House. Paul Sperry in October wrote a very detailed report out on the association, on the contractors, on his association with Georgia Tech and the Defense Intelligence Agency. And that's important because it shows you that here you got a guy that's picked by the Defense Intelligence Agency, one of the gurus in cybersecurity, in a contract using Georgia Tech to create and counter cyber attacks by foreign governments and private industry attacking the cyber system. So that's very important because they're at the tip of the spear on how to fight this stuff on there. And then you've got in the indictment in the 27-page charging Sussman, it cites 8 individuals, including Sussman, but doesn't identify him by name. And that's where Durham in his final report stated it was a conspiracy. Okay, but he didn't charge a conspiracy. But however, in his first indictment, he alleges and proves there's a conspiracy because he identified 8 people involved in manufacturing what? A crime. As a conspiracy to do what? To
So, John, if he alleged DA being involved, again, why didn't he identify?
We're going to get that at the end
Okay,
of this.
all right.
Okay, so then Jaffe, who he's advising the Biden administration on the White House on the infrastructure policies on cybersecurity. So now you can see also he's got a long-term association with Seaman and Perkins Coie. And so you've got, now you see the dots. Jaffe, Seaman, Perkins Coie, long-term relationship, DNC, Biden or Obama administration. So now you can start seeing how the dots connect. Next slide. Okay, documentary evidence on Hillary. Hillary puts out an email. And on the email, Jake Sullivan puts out a statement on her behalf. And on her email, she on Twitter, she puts out there, computer scientists have apparently uncovered a covert server linking the Trump organization to a Russian bank-based bank. When's the date on that? October 31st, 2016. So it's just more evidence to show Hillary. It's just more evidence to show her complicity in the conspiracy. Next slide. Then you have another email by her on October 31st by Hillary Clinton on Twitter. It's time for Trump to answer serious questions about his ties to Russia. Now you have to laugh on this. Here you got the gal, one of the major figures behind orchestrating this plan with Obama and his ilk and Brennan and all these guys to destroy Trump. And she puts out an email 4 days or 5 days before the 2020 election. Or 16 election, excuse me, 16 election, out to the public, 4 things you need to know about the Trump organization's secret server to communicate with Russia, AlfaBank. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. Donald Trump has a secret server. Hillary, yes. It was set up to communicate privately with a Putin-type bank. Yes. When a reporter asked about it, they shut it down. 1 week later, they created a new server. So you got to laugh. Well, it's not funny. It's sad.
No, it isn't.
Right. So let's go into this. So that's we know Hillary loses the election. 2017, you still got things going on. Fusion GPS and this guy Daniel Jones. Who's Daniel Jones? Daniel Jones worked for Senator Feinstein on her Senate staff. And when he left the Senate staff, he started a group, an outfit called Penn Quarter Group. And what his purpose was is he collected or got all these people to pour money in. And he got, I think, 10 people, and they said they had $50 million, and they were going to rehire Steele and focus in on using the unverified dossier and the Alpha Bank information from these 10 wealthy donors to tie Trump with Russia. Now, this is in March of 2017, after Trump's elected. So it just goes to show you, and he planned to share all his information with policymakers on Capitol Hill and the press and the FBI. And that's what he was doing with his group. That was going to be part of that thing in March, which they started up and started doing. And then you had the Mueller investigation start up in July. So now when you start connecting the dots, you see how they did these prong attacks coming in from different angles to do what? To destroy Donald Trump at all angles on this. That was Daniel Jones' involvement with Fusion GPS. Next slide.
John, I got to point out to the audience, so they don't think that we have, a little bit less than a third grade education. 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth paragraph down. That says Mr. Sean Jones. And I told my comrade, John Seaman, that John, I think that should be Dan Jones. And all right. And correct. Whenever, audience, whenever we do these type of investigative backgrounds, you literally know everything you humanly possibly can about each individual, i.e. Mr. Jones was involved in the Senate report that he authored for torture by the CIA in 2014. Take it where you want it. I'm just putting that behind his dossier right there.
Then we have another instance of Fusion GPS involved in what? In June of 16. Remember the famous meeting that the newspapers had where Donald Jr. and Jared Kushner and Manafort met this Russian gal, Natalia, I can't pronounce her last name, Visa, kill it, it's a Russian name. It's on the slide. They meet with her. The purpose of the meeting was allegedly to talk about the children, whatever, but that meeting was set up by guess who? By Fusion GPS founder Glenn Simpson. He was working with her to run her into that meeting again to make it appear and get it out to the press that Don Jr., Kushner, and Manafort were involved, tainting again Trump with Russian collusion. However, that all fell apart. That meeting got no traction because I believe the head Russian behind it, who was allegedly a dual CIA Russian informant, a double agent, died in some helicopter crash, and that came to light, and that thing kind of like disappeared off the state of the media, so it never went anywhere. But you gotta find, when you start connecting the dots, by itself doesn't mean much, but when you think back in June when this meeting happened, you have to go back and Google and see all the newspaper headlines from the Times and all the networks and CNN and big meeting and blah, blah, blah. That's how you bring it together and give some meaning to it. That's where the meaning comes in. Just another tidbit to show the role of how guilt by association, of how they want to deceive you by getting this information out. Go ahead, Brian. Okay, let's talk about coincidence or commonalities. What's the commonality between Alverbich of CrowdStrike and Jaffe? Okay, well, what's funny is Georgia Tech. Alverbich is a graduate from Georgia Tech, okay? And Jaffe had a contract with the Defense Department working through researchers at Georgia Tech. Both are considered the experts in the cybersecurity field. Both have worked with both FBI, DOJ, and I believe the CIA. Don't quote me on that, but I believe they were working with the intelligence services. And both were connected to who? The DNC and Hillary Clinton's campaign on it. And our next, just to let you know, our next podcast, I have there General Flynn, but we're going to do FISA and the connecting the dots on the Intelligent Community Assessment Report. We're going to connect those dots on how those two documents were manufactured as criminal overt acts to tie it into the original conspiracy agreement. Now, I want to cover this to explain to the audience why the Alpha Bank was not a dirty trick, but a crime. Okay. Contrary to the big narrative put out by the media and a lot in the legal community out there, and a lot of pundits on our side put it out that this was just a dirty trick, that it wasn't a crime. Well, it was a crime. Why was it a crime? Because they manufactured data. They created data that didn't exist. Okay, like on the Yoda phones and that. And they also were able on that contract to be able to get into the executive office when Trump was president as a president. Okay, so we're past the dirty trick situation here on it. And these are the areas that why you need to have a conspiracy investigation to find out what was the damage done when they were able to get into the executive office of the presidency of the United States and plant evidence. That's a major question that never got solved or answered. Okay, in the opening statement of Sussman's prosecutor, his prosecutor said that opposition research is not a crime, but lying to the FBI is. When Durham took his case on Sussman and DeVecchio to the grand jury, they looked at it as opposition research, not a crime. They use that so they could indict remember when I explained the elements of the crime, the substantive crime? Well, lying to the FBI was a substantive crime of the conspiracy. He can do that. That's a prosecutor's choice of what Durham did, and as prosecutors, they made that call. However, if you talk to anybody that's ever done conspiracy cases or and be honest with the public, this is a crime. What they did was criminal because they manufactured data. Okay. And that's a crime. And what was the purpose? To do what? To destroy Trump, to make him look like he committed a crime. And that's a criminal act itself. So that is why if a new president comes in, gets an attorney general, orders his AG to put a team together, and they actually do a conspiracy case, they will be able to use all this evidence in their conspiracy case and charge these overt acts, okay, as criminal overt acts. And then you will see how the conspiracy comes together. That's why the conspiracy case is so important. By Durham not doing a conspiracy case, okay, that part is still open for prosecution. It's still viable legal pathway on there. And Durham stated, I believe, that he didn't plan on doing a conspiracy case because he never looked at it through the origins, even though he documented, and this is important. One thing he did do right in his filings, in his findings, he documented a conspiracy. He stated so in his findings. He implicated Obama and Biden in there. And he basically met all the elements, what I covered last week under USC 18 title USC 371, the fraud statute of defrauding the United States and the executive office. So that's why it's important for the next president to do a case. And we're going to cover the next overt criminal act next week, both of them, taking the information from the Steele dossier, getting the first FISA warrants, and then we're going to cover the framing of General Flynn in that next segment. So I hope that I didn't put people to sleep, and I hope it all flows, and I hope I connected the dots for you.
John, I hope the audience appreciates the amount of homework that you did, my friend. It's absolutely incredible. Absolutely mind-boggling, incredible, the facts. And what it would take now, we both know, now I don't know if the audience can appreciate this, you're saying the next election, which is right around the corner, right? The next president. What it would take a task force of monumental size to break this down with the data, the financial side, and AlfaBank, and all the political background of every one of these characters, really.
Well, Brian, I will push back a little bit.
Right.
The amount of evidence that's already been documented is there. All they need to do is go back and just do the investigative steps that need to be done by interviewing all the participants, all the people who have the roles have been identified. You have the overt acts have been identified. So all that needs to be really done, taking Durham stuff and the IG stuff and all the other reporting that's been out there and everything else, is go in and start corroborating and putting the pieces together. But the base stuff is there. They just need to do the homework, pull the communications, match up the timelines with the deal. It's no different than what we did in Afghanistan and putting the Taliban case together, where you had all the information. You just needed to put it together and then come up with a game plan how to do it.
John, what would you do with Durham? What would you do with Durham?
Well, with Durham and those guys, you don't do anything with, because they're not really the fish you want to waste your time frying. Durham, I think, and Barr, I think, basically have exposed themselves on who they are. And it's really sad, because I had the utmost respect for Bill Barr, and I had the utmost respect for Durham. And it breaks my heart to see, I thought, professionals sell themselves out and betray their country. I don't have any other words for them. Because Durham, I don't know why Congress, and this would I throw out to the House committee, why Jordan and these guys didn't ask Durham on when they had him. Why didn't he do a conspiracy case? And why did they look through the prism that AlfaBank was just opposition research when it's a criminal overt act? There's no argument about it. That's all. John,
anything else in summary of another outstanding week? And my head hurts again.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity. I hope this is making sense to the public. This is all for them. That's why we're doing it in a 10-part series. So we break it up individually, and then we'll synopsisize it at the end. It should all come together for you. But all the base pieces, as you can see, as I said, we're building brick by brick by brick. And the themes, you have to break it down into the themes. Remember, the big lie theory, the unmaskings, the misuse, color of authority, the conspiratorial agreement. If you keep those 4 things in your head as a public person, this should be pretty simplified, because what was the purpose? To destroy Trump, keep him from being elected, and interfere in 3 presidential elections.
And possibly restore the country. John, thank you again. And for everybody out there, again, I've said it in several of the podcasts with John. Look at the enthusiasm in this man. We have no sponsors. Nobody's paying him. Nobody's paying either one of us. Put the word out. Do your own homework. And I always say at the end, have peace if you can find it. It's not a bad thing to have. However, you need the other 2. You need a little bit of love. Isn't how they do that these days? But you got to have a lot of this, man. You got to have some strength, inner and outer. John, take care. We'll do some homework for next week for the audience. Really appreciate you, man.
Thank you, Brian.
We'll
Talk to you later. Have a great week.
Take care.